Now, please help me enthusiastically welcome our speaker, Laurie T.
My name's Laurie, and I'm an alcoholic. And so I got a big room full of guys. Almost all guys. There's a few. Almost. So a friend of mine said that I should start out with some kind of a line, and I'm not really that good at thinking up any lines. But my sobriety date is August 7th, 1994, and I got sober here in Prescott. When I was 12 years old, my parents, my mom and my stepdad, dropped me off at training camp for Scientology. And I went about another 9 months or a year before I saw them again. And before I got there, I was in junior high school, and I was smoking a little pot here and there, but I wasn't drinking. I wasn't really exposed. My parents didn't drink. And I was in this training camp in Scientology, and I was the youngest one there by far. And basically what you do is you get up and you exercise, and then we did all this physical labor, fixing up whatever building they had, etc. And training me for something, training me to be a good Scientologist. What happened really is that most of the people that were there were searching for something, probably like my parents were searching for something. And so they weren't that great. There were a lot of adults that were ragers and abusers and child molesters and all kinds of other stuff that you don't really want to have to be around. The other thing that I learned there is they have what's called training drills, and I learned how to sit with an adult, and they were training me to not react to anything. And so I learned over hours and hours and hours of this training that I learned how to not react. So I didn't have feelings, I didn't get angry, none of the normal things that you would think that a person is supposed to do. And then once I left there, I went and I became a nanny with Scientology, and I was a nanny for the rest of my time there, really. During that time, I learned how to drink. I was too young to buy booze, and so I would go to the local 7-Eleven, and I would pay the nearest drunk to go in and buy me a bottle of whatever, usually something really delicious like Mad Dog 2020 or something else with a screw top. And then he and I would sit out back by the dumpster and drink it, and I would drink until I couldn't feel. I already couldn't feel, but I could tell that I couldn't feel, and I didn't want to feel that way, so I would drink until I couldn't feel. And you weren't allowed to drink in Scientology. Drinking was not allowed. And so I spent a lot of time just trying to hide that and whatever. And by the time I was 16, I figured out a way out, because they don't really encourage you to leave. And so my way out was a guy, which is almost every way out that I ever had was a guy. And so I moved in with some guy that I'd known for about 5 minutes, and I got a job, and I went about trying to be a grown-up. And a lot of that involved drinking. And being 16, and I was living with somebody who was in his 30s, and trying to pretend like I was somebody that I wasn't, and learning as I go. That's basically what I did. And I did not have a high school education. I had an 8th grade education, and I had no abilities whatsoever except how to be a nanny and how to drink. and how to get what I needed by trading with guys. And so that's what I used. That was my skill. And whatever job I found, they would train me. They would do whatever training I needed for that job, and I would just sort of pretend and and I was smart, and I could learn how to do stuff, be a secretary. And I mean, I even worked in a place where you have a cord and you plug it in to connect a phone call, and that definitely dates me. And I went about trying to live. And I did a decent job, but I was drunk most of the time. And I managed to piss off enough people where I was at that I needed to leave there. And so I had a half-brother who lived in Prescott. And I said, I started talking to him, and he said, "Oh, why don't you come for a visit?" Which I did, and I arrived on a Greyhound bus with a box big enough for somebody to live in, and I was there for a visit, and because this was going to be my new place until there was another new place. And so I went about the same pattern of living. I traded for what I needed, whether it was housing or food or a job or a car or whatever. And I continued to use what I thought was the only asset that I had. One of the things about Scientology that I find that is interesting now, my dad recently died he was 93, and he spent 70 years in Scientology. And he was my hero. I thought he was amazing, and even though he was never around, and once I got sober and I really started to see the patterns of what was happening, he was a terrible dad, but I thought he was amazing. And I watched this YouTube video of my dad being interviewed by somebody in Scientology, and he referred to L. Ron Hubbard, which is the guy that started Scientology. He referred to him as God. And so what I started to realize once I got sober is that my understanding of God was a human being. And everybody in Scientology did what he said that you had to do. If he said it, that was the gospel, basically. And so when I got to the program, I didn't really come willingly. Well, I sort of came willingly. I went on a trip, and it didn't go well, mostly because I was drinking and I was in another country. And so I came back and I thought, I really need to do something about this. I really just need to drink less. And I had made friends with a guy in the program, and I had a girl that I met through counseling that I was in the program. And so I had been hanging out with them for quite a while. And I went and said, where could I go to a meeting? And I went to my first meeting, and it was in the basement of the Catholic Church. And I sat in the back, and I couldn't wait for it to be over, and I was walking to my car. I just didn't know. I didn't fit, and that was probably the biggest thing. Like, when I got out of Scientology, I didn't fit anywhere. I didn't really fit in Scientology, but you just follow every rule, and then you can pretend that you fit. And it was the same way that I felt in AA. So anyway, I met my friend after, and I told him, that some guy hit me up after the meeting at my truck, and that was the only thing I remembered about the whole meeting. But what happened was that there was something here. I didn't know what it was. I didn't really want to come back, but I didn't want to drink. And I started hanging out more. I had been friends with Mark, who is sitting here, for about a year. And once I got sober, then suddenly I was a lot more appealing to him. And he decided that he would ask me out on a date. And so 26 years later, we were still dating, really. Um, I think I think my life started when I came to AA and when I stopped drinking. And the reason that it started was because I was finally starting to be aware. I was finally starting to be something besides broken. And I would go to meetings with Mark on occasion, but I didn't get a sponsor right away. I didn't work the steps. I didn't do any of the stuff that you're supposed to do or the people told me to do. I just figured I'm going to do this on my own. And after a few months, well, after about 3 months, we were pregnant. Then another couple months, we got married, because everything is bass-ackwards. And then I wasn't drinking, and I was living, Mark and I were living together, and Mark's sponsor had passed away, so neither one of us were going to meetings, neither one of us had sponsors. And you can imagine how amazing it was at my house. I was crazy. And without drinking, without a program, I had no tools to do this life. And then Mark got a sponsor, and I could start to see where things started to change for him, and he didn't react the same way as in the patterns that we had started to create. And so after a little while, I went and got a sponsor. And I was pretty defiant. I was totally against the idea about God. The only kind of God I understood was nothing, really. I had no experience with any kind of a God that made sense. And she didn't care about that. She just said, let's work the steps. And so I met at her house every week for a year, and we went through the book. And when we got to step 2, she didn't say, you have to have a God to be sober. She didn't say, I can't sponsor you if you don't do this. She just said, go to meetings, go to this meeting. I was going to 1 meeting a week, and meet here and come back and see her. And so I was going to the meeting, and it was a women's meeting. And I went to her and I said, all they do is talk about God there. Every time my ticket gets called, it's on step 2. And I just pretend like I don't have a ticket. I just tore it up or sat on it or stuck it in my shoe or something. And I said, I don't know what to do about that. And she said, just tell the truth. I'm like, I almost started laughing, like I didn't tell the truth anyway, but I wasn't going to go into a room full of alcoholics and say I didn't believe in God. And she said, just go and tell what the truth is for you and see what happens. And so, I think it was the next meeting, I'm not sure. My ticket got called, and so then I said, and it was step 2, of course, and I said, I don't believe in God. And then the room was just quiet, and then I didn't say anything else, and then I said pass, and then someone else got called, and no one beat me up after the meeting or flattened my tires or told me I couldn't come back. And a lady came up to me after the meeting and said, I really appreciate the courage it took to be honest. And so I think that was really the beginning of me learning how to be honest, but it was also the beginning of me realizing, like, this program is for anybody. I didn't have to have a certain qualification to be here, except to be a drunk or an addict. And so she took me through the steps, and we got to step 4, and she said make a list, and I did, and I had all my 3rd grade teacher and all these different ones, and then she very patiently and kindly said, your mom's not on this list. And what about Scientology? And what about the guy that raped you there? And what about, And I'm like, I'm over that stuff. I don't have any feelings about that stuff. I don't have a resentment. And she reminded me that probably everyone has a resentment against their mom. And so we started there, and then we did a few on Scientology. And the way she had me work the 4-step on my mom was, I looked at all the stuff that, whatever my resentments were against her, and then what's my part and all that, and then I got to the delusion. And My delusion about my mom was a little harder to come to, and what she said in helping me was, what do you feel like is the lie about your mom? And what I realized was that my mom abandoned me. And so if you have a mom that abandons you, then that must mean she doesn't love you. And if you have a mom that doesn't love you, then who's going to love you? And that's how I lived my whole life. And without realizing it, like I lived every day, every relationship, every job that I ever had was based in this, along with a lot of other delusions, but was based in this as a main delusion. And at that point was the beginning of me starting to realize that this program was going to change my life. It took a long time. I've been sober for 26 years, and I still don't have my shit together, and I still make a lot of mistakes, and I still don't work the program perfectly. But I have tools that help me when I get stuck, and that first set of steps was instrumental in doing that. The other thing that happened when she was trying to help me figure out about God was she had me make a list of characteristics that I felt safe with, because I felt unsafe everywhere I went. And one day, so our son is now 3, 2.5 and 3, and one day he just doesn't want to do whatever it is I'm telling him to do. And I didn't want kids because I knew that if I had kids, I was going to raise them the same way that my parents raised me. And he was mad about something, and I was mad because he wasn't doing whatever I asked him to do. And so he was standing there with his fists clenched. And in that moment, I knew that I was going to hit him, because that's what was given to me. And my sponsor had offered the tool of leaving the room, which was I never thought of as an option. And so I ran out of the room because I don't want to hit. And so I ran out of the room and I locked myself in the bathroom. And I sat on the floor and I started crying. And in that moment, I asked for help. I don't know what I'm asking for help. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm locked in the bathroom crying. And my son is on the outside of the door and he's crying. And I was able to open the door and I didn't hit him. And at the end of this month, he's going to be 26, and I've never hit him. And that's 100% because of this program. I got to learn something different than what I was given, and I got to set down stuff that didn't work and that wasn't true. And I wouldn't have known any of that. I wouldn't have known what wasn't true. I wouldn't have known what didn't work if I hadn't come here, if I hadn't come to meetings, if I didn't get a sponsor, and had somebody to guide me through and say, that's not how somebody with integrity acts. That's not, you can't lie and live an honest program, which I still, I think I was 10 or 11 years sober and I was still telling lies that I had to go back and make amends for, which really sucks. Amends, it's great, but also I don't want to have to make too many of them. Over the time that I've been sober, lots of stuff has happened, We had another son who was born premature and just, it was a struggle. And we've gone bankrupt and we've had lots of life experiences that were not great in sobriety. And I think the best thing that has happened is that I have learned to ask for help. And I've learned to say, I don't know what to do when I can't afford to buy my kids shoes. And I don't know what to do when my life is, when I feel crazy. And I don't know what to do when I'm with my husband and everything he does is pissing me off. I don't have those tools except for the tools that I got here. One of the, I think, hardest things that I've walked through, besides all that, besides raising kids, and I haven't hit the second one either, which is great. He's glad too. He's going to be 18, or he's already 18, and he's going to go to college this September. And these are all things like I was a kid, grew up in Los Angeles. I wasn't meant to have like a decent family and stay married for 26 years. And, you know, I mean, I was a hooker that didn't know how to make money. I just traded for rent. Like it's just, I wasn't, I've been gifted this life. I've been given the grace to come here, even though some days I didn't want to. And the opportunity to have people in my life and friends in my life and relationships that I never would have had if I hadn't shown up. And I'm not a step guru or a big book guru. I can't remember anything unless I read it again and again. And I've been given that gift by having people in my life that say, go to page whatever it is, 62 or 86 or whatever. And so probably one of the greatest things that I've been able to do is sponsor other people, because they start out just the same way I did, confused and frustrated, and a lot of them not willing, and I wasn't willing, and I have the experience where I can be helpful to them. And we go through the book together again, and then I learn more stuff, and then I learn how it's not Mark's fault, or I learn how to be kind, and I learned how to be respectful, and I also learn, how to not tell people what I think about them sometimes. It's just, like this program has taught me how to be a woman of integrity, which I was never. I was never a woman of integrity. My oldest son, so what I was going to say is one of the hardest things that I've done is raise kids, and trying my hardest to raise them in a way that I was not raised. And I get to do that with somebody who's in the program and who also works a program. And I also have to make amends to them, and I also have to be truthful with them, and I also work my program with them, even though they're not in the program. And my oldest son in high school wrote a speech that he gave and talked about. He gave to like a group of like, I don't know what they were, like lions or something, like normal people. They were just a whole room full of normal people, and he's talking to them about his experience with being raised by two people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the gifts that he's been given without us even realizing that we were giving those gifts, by us just living with integrity, and by us going to him and saying, hey, when we were bankrupt and you had $3,000 saved up, I spent it on the mortgage, or I spent it on the utilities. And then I had to make amends for that, and I had to pay him back the $3,000, which he was ready to buy the car and we didn't have the money. And I mean, it's a humbling experience to sit in front of your teenager and tell him that you spent the money that he saved. And to be able to have him give me a hug after I was done saying that, and to have him not hate me like I hated my parents. And all of that, every bit of that, is because I come here. There's plenty of days when I don't want to go to a meeting. I'm home, I'm working in the yard, I'm hot, I don't want to shower, I don't want to see anyone. There's plenty of days like that still. And Mark will be like, you going to the meeting? And I'm like, and I go, even though I don't want to. And I always hear something. I feel much better after the meeting than before I went. I'm always glad, or at least partially glad, that I went. And a lot of times there's somebody there getting a birthday that I knew when they came in, and they're getting 15 years, or there's somebody there that says something that I really need to hear. And I don't do this program perfectly, not even close. This last year has been difficult at best. I mean, for everyone. There were two people in my life that were very close to me that died. And somewhere in that space, I lost my connection with God. And so in sobriety, I've had really strong connections with my higher power, and then not so strong. And I always thought, well, I'll just go back to a meeting, I'll just start working the steps again, I'll just, and it'll come back. And my life is going to be, I'll feel comfortable again. I won't feel this weird feeling of not belonging again. And I didn't want to say in a meeting that I didn't, that I had this disconnection from God, because, somewhere in my head, if you have 26 years, you're supposed to have your shit together, and you're supposed to be able to do this thing right. And you're not supposed to get disconnected. And so I didn't really talk about it. And then I just got a little bit crazier and a little bit crazier. And I called a friend of mine and I said, I think I need to work the steps again. Would you be willing to take me through the steps? And she asked me about what was going on. And it's a start. Like, working the steps helps me, reminds me what the tools are. It gets me back into the middle of the herd. And I had to look at my relationship with the higher power differently, because the one that I had gotten really small. And a really small God in my life doesn't work, because if my problems are bigger than my God, I got nothing. I have no help. And my sponsor says, she says, how big is your God? That's what she says to me all the time. Where are your feet planted, and how big is your God? And so I started trying to get reconnected. And I did lots of different things, and I got a lot of different help. And she's taken me through the steps again. I've done the steps about 15 times. For every problem I have, I go do the steps. And go bankrupt, go do the steps. Your son is sick, do the steps. My sponsor is, leaves, go do the steps. That was the only way that I knew how to get better. And the other thing that I had to kind of learn was to be able to trust myself and to be able to trust my intuition. And part of what I learned is that that's God for me too. That intuition, that feeling of inner peace and all that stuff, I've relearned here. And so I can come and I can say honestly, just like I did the first time when I said I don't believe in God, I can honestly come here and say, I don't work this program perfectly. And what's happened is I've still stayed sober. And the way that I've stayed sober is by telling the truth about what's going on, and by staying connected to the people in the program. I've always had a sponsor. Well, not quite true. I got a resentment against my second sponsor, and then I quit calling her for about a year. So I guess so already. I would highly not recommend that. But what I found is that no matter what changes are happening in my life, as long as I keep coming here, as long as I keep staying connected to people in the program, then I stay sober. And if I'm sober, my life is good, and then it can get better from there. And I think a lot of the pride and ego and all the other stuff that comes with being afraid to tell, being afraid to say that I don't know where God is in my life, that gets smashed by me working the steps. And I'm really grateful for this program for a lot of reasons, but probably the biggest reason is for my husband. I'm not always grateful for him every day, but I'm grateful that we're able to work together and be able to stay married. Do anything for 26 years is unbelievable. I couldn't be in a relationship for, 25 minutes. And I think the other piece of that is being able to create a family and being able to be a good mom. And the other day my son said that he has these friends coming from California, and we were talking about it, and he said that he's told them all about me, and I'm like, that's weird. You don't tell your friends about your mom, you know. And he said that he's really grateful for the way, this is the 18-year-old, he's really grateful for the way that he's been raised, which is with honesty and a willingness to communicate and the ability to let him experience his own stuff. Anyway, I'm just, I feel like I kind of got lost this last year, and working and coming back to meetings and working with women in the program has brought me back to the center. And I can't be, I just don't know how to be more grateful for that. Yeah, I think the hardest part of standing up here and talking to you guys is being willing to just kind of tell the truth, even though it might not be that amazing and interesting or funny, because I used to try to compete with Mark, who's very funny, and what I found is that my story is different and my personality is different, and so I get to share a part of myself. And I don't know. I just I think all I can do is just say how grateful I am, and that I don't really know. I don't know how to get past those things like Scientology and parents that aren't there and all that kind of stuff. There's not really a way that I know how to get past that, but what I can do is learn how to live through it, and that's what I've learned how to do in AA, and that's what I've learned how to do by telling the truth. And that's all I have. Thank you.